But today, if you see across center or states, the real estate sector, which is booming and which has hugely contributed, and you can see the impact of the growth process around any township. The maximum amount of corruption is around land. And that's across the country. I jokingly always remark in Hindi that in the good old days, who's a good political worker or a political leader, it used to be said, वो अच्छा है जो ज़मीन के साथ जुड़ा हुआ है. अब है जो ज़मीनों के साथ जुड़े हुए हैं. This is the change which has taken place. So the real estate sector, which has hugely contributed in the last 15 to 20 years, has become a cause for a scam across the country, in state after state. Telecom and highways. Now, whenever you select the personnel who will run this, the personality of the leader of a coalition has to be such that he is able to decide the right man to run these sectors. You can't convert success stories into scandals. And that is because you say that I have a compulsion of coalition politics. Now, coalition can't be a compulsion, coalition is a reality. And coalition also is an asset in one sense that you have different aspirations of regions which are represented in government. The Northeast feels it's represented, Kashmir feels it's represented, Tamil Nadu feels it's represented, tribes feel they are represented. And therefore, in selecting the person, the leader of the coalition has to have the last word. And if he finds somebody is misconducting himself, he must not wait for 3 years. He has a responsibility to act at that time. Now, unfortunately, it's not that the whole idea of coalitions becomes unacceptable. The moot lesson is the leader must have the capacity to enforce the agenda. The leader must have the capacity to enforce ethics. And the leader must have the last word in deciding who does what. Otherwise, what will happen is leadership will no longer be an art of or an instrument of taking decisions and enforcing them. The leadership will become a state of helplessness where you give explanation as to why I could not take decisions. Now, leadership is not deferring decisions for want of consensus. Leadership is deciding and enforcing that consensus. And then everybody falls in line. No partner of a coalition can claim a right of veto. And additionally, coalitions run on trust. You can't say, well, all right, I have to expand my own base, therefore, even though I use him for the purposes of a coalition, I must now encircle him in such a manner that I am able to eventually transfer his base to myself. Now, these are all, without taking names, I'm giving real life examples. The moment you get into this trap, this whole fear that coalitions will become a liability. But if we are to prevent that, then there are other democracies in the world which run. Britain today, it has its problems with its own coalitions. It's running it. Fortunately, our experiment from 1998 to 2004 was not difficult. There were oppositions which used to come even to effective decisions and reforms. But then decision making is the art of the possible. You have 10 items on the agenda. You don't decide all 10 in the same year. You decide one, then after 6 months you decide another, and therefore the process goes on. From 2004 to 2009, it was the veto of the left, it could be said. But post 2009, I think we are seeing all the weaknesses of a coalition which can be corrected, which are in fact self-inflicted problems and not problems in the structure of a coalition itself. I think, in a nutshell, it's a reality today. If we want it to go on issue-based politics, one issue which I am sure which concerns everybody here, is, can there be a consensus on certain issues? And this is a question which industry always, of course there can be a consensus of large number of issues. On the last day of the last session of Parliament, my party saved the pension bill. Otherwise it was likely to be rejected at the stage of introduction itself. The government had not put its house in order. The women's bill, reservation bill, couldn't have been cleared in the Rajya Sabha where the government is in a minority till we had taken the initiative of supporting it. The nuclear liability bill could never have been cleared unless the government actively consulted us. We suggested changes. And then a consensus legislation came up and it was smoothly cleared. The final word on this is, you can have issues on which there can be a consensus. But the initiative to develop the consensus has to come from the government. Mr. Pranab Mukherjee has a favorite word called cooperative federalism. And he always quotes it. And it's a statement of a nice, good, positive intent. But then you can't have cooperative federalism only to say that, well, such a proposal of the central government be cleared. There are states which are crying of discrimination. The moment the government realizes that cooperative federalism has to be a two-way traffic, I think we can move in terms of developing that. Because India is, yesterday I was calculating, we have a chief minister's conference of my party today, that we are a part of government, as an opposition party, we are a part of government in regions which control 35% of India's population. And therefore, an opposition of this kind can't be taken lightly. But to the entire process of a Lokpal debate, I am as much a spectator as you are. Because consultation with opposition, instead of sending a positive signal, I think the government feels it sends the wrong signal. So we have not even been informally informed as to what happens. We haven't even seen the drafts. And therefore, if they want the cooperation, the initiative has always to come from the government. I don't think we get into this process of using phrases like constructive opposition. There must always be a reasonable amount of tension between the opposition and the government. Only then checks and balances will be maintained and the best of Indian democracy will come about. But then everybody in the activity of politics also thinks in terms of the country. And there will be a large number of issues on which a consensus can develop in the natural course. Most legislations are passed through consensus. Parliamentary standing committees in almost 95 to 98% of the cases have developed a system of giving a report by consensus. It's only rarely that you have notes of dissent. They discuss, they accommodate. And therefore, these are systems, institutions which are evolving. And I'm sure we can move to an issue-based agenda if we are able to resolve the structural issues of a coalition itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have some time for Q&A, but before that, may I request Mr. Jaitly, I hope we reach consensus at least on the GST amendment bill, which is very crucial for moving forward. So can I have some word on that? Yeah.
I think GST is the point on which cooperative federalism is always pleaded. Some of the states have reservations, and therefore the center has to bring those states on board after removing their fears. And therefore your relationship with the states, irrespective of the government in power, if it is one which is positive, you'll be able to move forward. After all, these are all art of the possible exercises. Now let me give you 3 illustrations, which I said in Parliament also.